Welcome back to the 2025 Sherburne SWCD podcast. My name is Miranda Wagner, and with me today I have Dana and Amy. Dana, can you introduce yourselves?
Sure. I am Dana Adams, local extension livestock educator in Stearns, Benton, Morrison, and Sherburne County. What I mostly do is provide technical assistance. So that can be working with our SWCD or NRCS or other organizations to provide education and engagement to dairy producers. But technical assistance and like field days. So I would offer them on like a dairy. So we would compare and contrast a parlor versus a robot and all the options that lie in every species. But I primarily focus on dairy. I also work with beef producers and any other livestock that my producers may have.
All right, thanks, Amy.
Yeah, so I'm Amy Robak. I work with Central Minnesota Cooperative. I am the lead environmental specialist here at the co-op. So we are agriculture cooperative that's based within Central Minnesota, but myself and I have a team of 3 other people. So we have technical services that span within Central Minnesota, but across the whole state of Minnesota. And we provide technical assistance with manure management, and then it goes all the way into cover crop, soil health, and irrigation water management. So we work a lot with the soil and water districts, with the NRCS, with the university, with the Minnesota Department of Ag, with MPCA. We work with all the agencies out there, and we help provide that technical assistance on the ground with producers in all areas and aspects of the conservation world. And then we kind of help bring and bridge that gap between the co-op world and the government world, if you want to call it, and bring that down to the grower level. So that's kind of high level of what we do here at the co-op. So.
Thank you. And first question, is it manure or manure?
I say manure, but
manure, I don't know. I guess that
you think about it. Oh no,
I don't know. Manure.
I know I started with a hardball question there. So let's talk about regulation for a minute. It's everyone's favorite topic, but when we're looking at feedlots, manure storage, who regulates in Sherburne County?
So, Dana, do you want to start with that one?
My understanding is that it's MPCA, so the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is the organization that regulates.
Yep. So Sherburne County does not have a local feedlot officer. Yeah. So it defaults back to the state level MPCA, and that office is out of the Brainerd office. So you have Courtney Frank and Rhonda Atkins. So they are the 2 feedlot officers that's out of the Brainerd office. I work with them on a regular basis. They are very nice people to work with. They're very pleasant to work with. I tell producers, do not be afraid of them. They're great people to work with. So.
And when we're talking about regulation, it's also important to remember that Sherburne County Planning and Zoning has some of their own language in their shoreline districts, property setbacks, things like that. So always check with MPCA, but also Sherburne County Planning and Zoning. And they have a solid waste division that you can work with. Dan Lucas, but then, sorry, not Dan, Dave Lucas, and then some other folks that work with him. And so when does MPCA get involved? What is the minimum size for regulation?
So I don't know, we both can answer. So typically MPCA, when large farms starts regulation level, it's either at 1,000 animals or 1,000 animal units. Yeah. Yep. And there's some, MPCA has a really good website that I think we can actually link to the podcast that can help determine that.
That animal units is, in my mind, one of the important parts of what Amy just shared. That like a chicken is not equal to a cow.
Correct.
So find out
Right.
how many chickens. I think that's like 0.33 is a chicken, like a laying hen. But like how many animal units you have that like how many you're working towards that 1,000 animal units before you reach out to MPCA being like, I'm at 1,000. What now?
Yep. Yep. That's a good point. Not every animal is the same size, and it's based on that 1,000-pound cow-calf pair. Or has that changed? Is that still correct?
Yep, they still go by cow-calf pair. So a cow-calf pair on the beef side is a 1.2. A dairy cow, just to say average 1,400-pound dairy cow is a 1.4.
Okay. So it's still kind of based on that 1,000 pound animal unit.
Yeah, and then on broiler barns, I want to say usually if you have 3 broiler barns on a permit, that would actually trigger a CAFO status.
And
What's
then
a
like
CAFO?
MPCA,
We just used an acronym. What's CAFO?
confined feeding operation.
Yep.
As in like the cows are inside
Yep.
rather than and we like open and close the blinds but
Yep.
it's just the cows that typically cows or feedlot animals or like poultry they're inside versus
Yep.
they're like wandering our fields.
Perfect. And are there any regulations kind of on the forefront happening in 2025 or 2026?
Oh, yes. There's some big changes coming in 2027.
Yes, I was like not 2025 but it is coming.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe.
what are they?
Oh, Danny, do you want to start?
I like reached out to like one of my feedlot officers that I'm on the Stearns County Feedlot Review Committee, and I work with her a lot. Really great gal. I enjoy talking to her, so I reached out to her yesterday to be like, I have some questions. But she said that they're updating the manure application in order to like to match our changing temperatures. So when you can apply your manure, and I don't. It's worthy of staying tuned for the details, but like when you can apply manure in order to be in compliance and like do it right because of our changing temperatures.
Yeah, so kind of like super high level. So sticking with the large farms. So large farms operate under a very special permit. They operate under either an SDS or an NPDS. Most of them are under an NPDS, which is a National Discharge Permit. And those permits are rotated on a 4 or 5 year schedule. And so these big 2027 changes are only affecting large farms, which are these NPDS or these SDS permits. These permit holders know this is happening. They're very well aware of it. So these are changes that are only happening on large farms. So want to make that very clear. Only large farms that have these very special permits. Main biggest changes is that if you're applying manure in the fall, you're going to have to follow and you fall in these sensitive areas. Sherburne County being one of them because of all the sandy soils. There's going to be a fun special map, which is extremely similar to the MDA fall map that they have for restrictions on nitrogen. You are going to have to follow best management practices when it comes to application of manure. Some of those can be fall cover crops. It could be stabilizers. It could be split applying your manure applications. It could be putting perennials back in the rotation. There's kind of a whole list. Again, the website has some really good 2-3 page kind of sheets that kind of explain all the changes, but that is the biggest change that's going to be happening coming in 2027 to these permit holders. The next biggest changes is when it comes to manure transfers. When the manure is going to be transferred from these permit holders to a non-permit holder. So let's say Amy is going to be transferring manure to Miranda. Miranda is going to have to report back to Amy what she's doing for crops, what the soil samples are saying, yield. So it's kind of like Miranda is going to have to report a mini farm plan back to Amy, and Amy's going to have to report on her permit what Miranda is doing. So MPCA cannot regulate someone that doesn't have a permit. So in order to kind of start tracking these manure transfers a little bit more in depth, they're going to have to essentially record on Amy's permit as the permit holder of what's happening on that acre. So those are kind of the two biggest changes. There's a few other smaller ones, but those are going to be the two biggest ones coming in 2027. Again, the website has like a 3-page document that explains the things a lot in depth. I'm telling producers that if they're falling in these sensitive areas, talk to Dana, talk to your feedlot officer, talk to myself at Central Soda. We can get you those maps. If your field falls in those areas, the feedlot officers can, I'm sure Miranda, you guys can at the Soil and Water District, the NRCS can. We can access those maps. You can access them yourself online to see if your field falls in that area. And then you can start preparing yourself. Okay, what do I need to do in 2027 to meet these fall manure application restrictions?
Sounds like a little bit more paperwork, but if it follows the same map as the groundwater protection rule, then you probably have a pretty good idea if you fall within those areas.
Yep.
And if you're in Sherburne County, you probably fall within those areas. So moving on from regulation, kind of, but storage of manure. What do you see as different kinds of storage that are currently being put in? You know, we have technology changing all of the time. The ponds that were put in 40 years ago are not the same thing that we're putting in today. What's going out on the landscape? Do you want to go first, Dana?
Well,
from the dairy side, what do you see going in?
Well, just like the really big manure lagoons. And then like not, I've seen some like what are they called? Like when you've renovated a barn, it has like slats, and then just like a manure pit that you pump every 6 months, so like seasonally, and then daily haul. I have a lot of small scale producers that, and I think about this because when I moved to like more rural Minnesota, you see those producers every day that are daily hauling up, just like, yes, that is what that means. Like, I see you, how are you doing? But that is still just a form of manure management, is like application, like daily or like every few days.
Okay. Amy, are you seeing anything different as far as what's being put in for manure storage?
Yeah, there's we do a lot of things with manure storage. Still see a lot of earthen basins going in. Digesters are becoming a little bit more popular on some of the dairy operations. We've definitely permitted for some more digesters on the larger operations. I still think the notion is out if it's the profitability is being calculated out yet. There's, I think in Stearns, there was one digester that has gone in. It's very impressive, I will say that. I talked to the owner, and they are still they're just operating now in the, they're going to be calculating out the return on investment, right?
You have to.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how that project moves forward. You know, we talked about, could they be a hub site, which would be an interesting concept. Yeah, right. Exciting. And because I think that could be something with the smaller dairy operations we have in the area. Could we have hub sites? I know that's been talked about before.
Yeah.
We have a lot of earthens going in. We still do some concrete. So there is concrete basins that still go in. Cost-wise, concrete's going to be higher than earthen. But in sensitive areas where we do have high water tables, sometimes concrete is still needed. Believe it or not, we still do recommend uprights. So those slurry storage by those blue ones you kind of see, they don't do a lot of them, but we still do. There has been cases where we don't need millions of gallons of pits, like a small wash water holding facilities, and just a cost-effective method that we would recommend uprights above grounds. So on that side, kind of on the dairy side, on the beef side and the chickens, we're just doing a lot of stacking slabs. So
Yeah.
just those concrete stacking slabs you see out there. And those are pretty straightforward. We do typically recommend producers put a roof on them. I will say 95% of producers are putting roofs on them. And if not, we say put the bracings in case you do want to put a
Mhm.
roof on them, because you can always do that later on. And then one thing on the poultry side, when we're doing projects with that, we tell producers, think about if you don't have on the broiler barns, they typically won't build the composting for the birds. So we just say, let's share one of those external walls and put those composting bins in. So again, trying to be cost effective when you're building your projects.
Mhm.
So
Amy, can you give a very brief description of what a digester is?
yeah, so a digester is pretty much, and Dana, you can probably elaborate more than I can, because I'm I'm really new to digesters too. But essentially, it's taking the manure in, and it's pretty much scrubbing it and taking the energy from it. And like what this one dairy is they're actually taking it and they're scrubbing it and they're taking the energy from it, and they're creating a either they're taking sometimes they take the solids off of it and they're removing the solids and like sometimes they remove phosphorus from it. That's one thing, and they create a nitrogen based product. So some digesters do that, and then they create a solid output product which just is high in phosphorus. Some digesters do that. This digester is actually taking it and this digester is putting it into a pipeline for energy. And I don't know if it's for propane or for that, I'm not for sure. But digesters do different things. I'm super new to digesters, so I'm not the correct person to answer that. I don't know, Dana, if you have a better answer for that one.
So I kind of think of it as like a rumen, as in
Mhm.
you put all these pieces in and you kind of like speed up that digestion or that fermentation process in order to get a product. And Amy made the excellent point of, I love talking about this with kids, of just like, you probably haven't heard this, but they are a way of extracting energy from something that could just like let that go. So we are capturing something that was previously not really captured or utilized. So they, Amy makes it is really exciting technology, but
Yeah.
how much I know about it, not very much. What I do understand is that it's a little bit of art and science, as in that there is a art to making this science work synchronously or perfectly. It doesn't just like, just plop the pieces in and you get magic. It doesn't work like that. It's a little bit
Right.
more nuanced, and there is that art to making a manure digester work. But I kind of think of it like a rumen. Beyond that, I don't know very much.
Okay, this one, I remember. This one's capturing the methane.
Cool.
And
Okay.
Sorry.
yes, this one's capturing the methane and it's putting it somewhere, somehow back into the pipeline. I don't know how this all works. It's a Finnish product that it's from Finland. That's all I know. That's like I said,
Cool.
I'm not the correct person to talk about digesters, but some digesters do different things. Now, I know there was one project that was going to happen that kind of got nixed,
Yeah.
where they can extract solids and put phosphorus all in the solids. And then essentially, instead of having a phosphorus-based manure product liquid, we have a nitrogen-based liquid product. So digesters do different things. The common ones I think capture the methane that then we can scrub and use for propane and all these other things.
Well, that's really neat. I don't know
I
how
know.
we can kind of move
I'm
on
not
from
the
that.
expert. I know very little.
So, without talking about digesters, our normal concrete earthen pits, how long should those things last in an operation?
That's a great question. I always default that back to the engineers. I've seen
Mm.
pits lasts more than 20, 30 years? That's a great question. I really don't have a good answer. As long as the liner is in good condition and the liner is still functioning and MPCA can still permit it without it leaking, the engineers can do a test called a Shelby tube test, where they, once the pit is empty, they can drive tubes down and extract that liner, and they actually can, there's a place in St. Cloud that actually tests for leakage.
Okay.
And then you put I forgot the name of it, but you fill the hole back in essentially, so it doesn't leak. We've done it a few times with the engineers over my tenure, but you can test pit liners for leakage. But that typically I default back to the engineers. But I mean, I've seen pits from the 80s that are still functioning well.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so when I, the friend that I referred to earlier, feedlot officer, but what her thoughts were is that if you're maintaining it and you are very conscious of like the integrity, then the maintenance part is the important part of that. If you just kind of like let it ride from year to year, then it could degrade over time and you wouldn't be the wiser. So as long as you're maintaining it and not just letting it, let nature act on it without like evaluating the situation, as long as you're managing it, you could substantially go farther than 20 years, but like it's not like a Best Buy date or like an expiration date. It's if you're managing it, then you can keep on utilizing this. But if you do have that question, Amy made the great point of like, then check, then test, engineer, test, so that I do this with like feed quality all the time of just like, don't guess, no, test.
I think if I have an operator that approaches me, they're like, oh, I don't know if I should place that or not. I guess usually if it's over 20 years, then maybe we talk about it and we either work with NRCS or Central Soda or whoever to take a closer look at it and see if it does. But if it's less than 20 years, I guess typically they're still working as they should pre 20 years. But like you said, Dana, everything is maintenance. It's with everything. If you maintain your equipment, your practices, then things last longer. And now, since coming right off of storage, because we're pumping out those ponds somewhere, land application. Tell me the importance of testing what you're pumping out of those ponds.
I feel like Amy has way more experience than I do in regards to
you go first, Dana.
Yeah,
Let's
you
talk
go first,
about
Dana.
Water quality.
Yeah.
In regards to like
the importance of testing what you're putting on. How does that affect our water quality? And then Amy, you talk about crop nutrients.
So in my mind, because I deal more with the livestock side of this rather than the crop, I've sat through enough soil and water and OCS presentations to kind of like buy the passive diffusion. But what you think you're getting based on what your animals have eaten, based on like rainfall, based on in those like open like situations, like that what you are getting may not be what you have. So testing ensures that you know what you have so you can apply at the appropriate rate. So you're not just like, I think that I have 10 and you actually have 20, which can lead to nutrient accumulation year after year after year, or just kind of runoff, or just like leaching. That is my musings, I guess you could say. Amy, please.
Well, those are accurate musings. You have been listening to those presentations.
I have. They're good presentations.
Yeah. All right, Amy, you write manure management plans.
Oh, yes, I write many manure management plans. Yes, testing is super important. So PCA says, first when you build a lagoon, we're supposed to test every single year for, I think it's like 3 to 4 years. Of course, when I do my presentations, I'm like, we need to test every single year, every time you pump. That's kind of my rule of thumb. Testing through DHIA and Sock Center, it's if you run like NPK and organic N, it's $40 for a test. It's not expensive to test your manure. It's the most inexpensive thing you can do to get the value out of your manure, to figure out how much NP and K you have in your manure, because I'll tell you right now, working at a co-op, commercial fertilizer is not cheap. It is not getting any
Mm,
cheaper. Application
yeah.
is not getting any cheaper. So it is very important to test your manure, because that leads to, of course, what are you putting on your crop? Because one, we don't want to over fertilize because of water quality issues.
Mhm.
Your return on investment is huge when, of course, margins are tighter. Crops might not be, we might not be getting the biggest bang for our buck when we're selling our crops, but again, we also think about crop nutrient interaction too, right? Because if we're
Yeah.
over applying one nutrient, we may not be uptaking another nutrient.
Mhm.
So it's really important to start with, I tell people when we're working with nutrient management, with crop production, what do we need to feed that crop? So we start with our total nutrients. We apply, what are we applying for manure? And then figure that whole thing out. And then what do we need for commercial fertilizer to feed that crop? Cool. So kind of starting there, and then we also look at our soil samples. So soil testing falls back into this too. We need to test our soils. So if we don't know what's in our soil, we can be overloading our soils with manure and commercial fertilizer. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a full circle effect. So we're not just testing our manure, we have to test our soils at the same
Yeah.
time too.
Well, I think one of my favorite things you just said was just like, if you over apply, you're leaving money on the table. You're applying it when it doesn't need to be applied.
Right.
And don't do that. Like, get the most out of your manure. And like the second favorite thing was like testing your soil, as in, like, this is what the soil is. Here's what I need for the crop, and I'm going to supplement with commercial fertilizer. But like
Right.
the big, all those pieces coming together, claps.
Yep, yep. And it's like I said, return on investment is really important, and every grower, focuses on that, right? So let's use our source. Manure is a great. It's organic. It has NP and K, and I know it has all these micronutrients too. It's great for soil health, soil biology. So let's utilize it. It's not just a throwaway source. Let's utilize it correctly. And let's plan these things out. I mean, the importance of planning, and let's not plan these things out in March and April. Let's not call Dana and Amy and Miranda and, hey, by the way, I'm going to be pumping manure tomorrow. What do I
You're
need
like,
to put on for rates? Let's call us like in November, December, right? And let's plan ahead. And that's where the importance of testing comes in, where we can start. I tell producers, pull those samples every single year, because then we start to create a baseline trend for our manure. And sometimes what I find with producers that pull even multiple samples during the hauling process, we
hmm,
can find sometimes bad samples, or we can find, I know in hog barns in particular,
hmm,
producers have found water leaks. I had one dairy producer that found a water leak because the samples were coming back watered down, because
yeah,
the historical samples were so high. And we're like, why are these samples so low? Well, here, the water leaks, right?
yeah.
Or keeping hauling records. Well, we're hauling out so much more manure. Why are we hauling out so much more manure? Because there's so much water in there, right? So
Mhm.
there's record keeping. And again, this is a whole nother topic, but record keeping is another important thing to do.
It's huge, and it's like one of those things that nobody likes to do because it's not very glamorous.
Yep.
But and so me and my husband bought a farm, and now I'm eating my own words of record keeping, of like finding that platform, that style that you like working in, so that it
Mhm.
makes record keeping easy, so that you can see those long-term trends about like how you're improving that variant, of like, this guy's weird. Why is it weird? Oh, well, you have a leak. That's why. But
Yep.
excellent.
And when we're talking about doing soil testing and testing whatever we're pumping out of our pond or whatever it might be, when you have someone that wants to take care of their nitrogen with their manure, uh, and not have to put on any commercial fertilizer, what do you see happen with our soils when that happens?
Typically, our phosphorus starts to get really high if we go to a
Mm,
nitrogen-based plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that particularly with the poultry species. So never, ever, ever create a nitrogen-based plan with a poultry species. You can never do that because your phosphorus will go through the roof and then you're going to have major concerns.
What are some of those concerns? Because I have seen many soil tests where the phosphorus is, in that extremely high level, and the 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 operator doesn't necessarily seem bothered by it. What should bother them about it?
The one thing I talk to producers is nutrient interactions. So when we get really high phosphorus levels, we start to inhibit uptake of other nutrients. So particularly zinc is one of them. So zinc uptake is inhibited with high phosphorus levels. And from there, it could be other nutrients. So that research really hasn't been explored. It's called the Mulder chart theory. That is just some very old research, but it's very pertinent that when you have high phosphorus, you have limited uptake and with other nutrients essentially. And the other thing is when you get high phosphorus levels, unfortunately, sometimes PCA will step in and say, you can't apply manure to the field. So when you get into other government programs, or if you get into NRCS or Soil and Water, and you come to Central Soda and be like, hey, I need your technical services to do this project. And all of a sudden I start digging into things and be like, you got really high phosphorus soils. You can't apply manure to that field. Well, all of a sudden you just lose that acreage to apply manure to, which is a big
It's
deal
expensive.
and is expensive. And all of a sudden you have to switch your plans and apply and buy commercial fertilizer. So it's a management technique. And that's a lot of time importance of acreage on the operation and planning acreage on that operation for that manure quantity that you have coming out of that animal species. And again, every animal species is different of how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium they're excreting. So acreage tied back to that animal excretion is very important. Now, when you have pen pack, let's say, you might not need as many acres as if you're with a poultry facility because poultry is excreting a lot higher nutrient content than a pen pack animal. So again, understanding animals' excretions of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is also important. So.
And then we look at it as, again, from that water quality standpoint,
Right.
where if you have extremely high levels of phosphorus, bonded with your soil, if that soil leaves your property through wind erosion, water erosion, it's going into our surface waters. And we know that we don't want excess phosphorus in our surface waters unless you like algae, poor water quality on your recreational lakes. And
No one wants that.
Oh, no one wants that? Yeah. So, and it's something that maybe you can't fix it the first year, but over time, if you are doing your soil test, you're testing your manure, and you're changing how you're applying manure, that's something that you can improve on your own farm.
Yep.
And again, it doesn't have to happen in a year, but something that you can work towards as a goal. And because we talked about soil testing, manure testing, how about the importance of calibration, whether, especially for those that are applying their own manure?
I feel like I have to
Calibration
default
is
to Amy. Yeah.
super important. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how important calibration is. I think that gets overlooked a lot is calibration. So calibration is really important. I know some of the soil and water offices actually have scales, portable scales. We have portable scales. I don't know if Dana, if you guys have portable scales.
We don't through like our office. I think we would default to soil and water NRCSs to like resources that they could get in order to do that. I know our Melissa Wilson does a lot. So there might be some like partnerships, some opportunities. But as far as our extension office in Stearns and Benton, Morrison, or Sherburne, we don't have one tied to our office.
Okay. Yeah, I know Benton has portable scales. Like I said, Central Soda, we do. I don't know, Miranda, do you guys don't have
We
portable
don't
scales, do
any
you?
longer.
Okay.
And honestly, if I needed to hook, someone up with one, I'd call Mike McMillan up at Benton Soil and
Yeah.
Water, and
Yep.
he's a great resource up there.
Yeah. So yeah, there's tons of the scales, but essentially like it's super easy, it's super quick. We do them all the time as long as the producer has the equipment full of manure. When we get there, we can do them in like half hour, 45 minutes with
Hmm.
the technology now. It's super important to calibrate. It's like I said, it's quick, it's easy. I typically am not super concerned with calibrating liquid with tankers when they have rate controllers, things like that, because
Mm-hmm.
that stuff is, that's
The
pretty straightforward.
technology's there.
The
Yeah.
technology is there. When it comes to bedding pack or when it's coming with litter, that's where, unless they have a scale, which some of the spreaders do have scales on it now, which is a little bit different. Again, technology. But when
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they don't, that's where I'm telling producers we need to calibrate. Now, if you're going with an MPCA permit or working with Soil and Water NRCS, that's part of the process, right? We have to do those calibrations. But I do encourage if you don't have those in those type of programs that we still calibrate. How often do we calibrate? It's good to calibrate like once every 3 to 4 years, definitely when you're changing tractors or changing equipment, or you're changing something like a bedding source or changing something drastically in the animal diet that the output coming from that manure, from the animal manure source is different. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more solid, a lot more liquidy, that we're gonna change that density of that manure. So,
So my last question on land application, when someone is coming to you, either of you asking for help with manure management planning and spreading, do you find that most producers have enough acres to fully utilize the manure coming off the farm? Or are they needing to look for additional fields or additional storage opportunities?
So it depends on the county because I
Okay.
cover four.
Mm-hmm.
um, Stearns, in my experience, they've typically had enough acreage in order to apply to their own. That's been my experience. I'm sure Amy has like a different experience. Um, and Morrison, most of my farms have enough like acreage, but I have not been engaged by like Sherburne as far as like being limited by acreage. But that's been my experience.
I would say it depends on the county and it depends on the size of the operation.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller dairy operations, no. They're typically looking at an expansion and then they're going to be inhibited by the acreage. When you're dealing with large dairies, they typically don't have problem finding acres because they
Yeah.
already own enough acres. Poultry sites, probably 99% of the time we have to get manure transfer acres because
Okay.
again, we talked about that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium
Mm-hmm.
excretion levels are so high that
Yep.
we have to find more acres. Beef sites, beef sites are probably, they usually have enough acres just because again, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium excretion levels are on the lower side that they typically have enough acres. Um, I struggle with a lot of the dairy sites having enough acres, the
Mm,
smaller dairy sites having
yeah.
enough acres, the small family farms. And then when I work with sites that have multiple sources, so let's say they have dairy plus they're bringing in poultry as a
Mm.
transfer, then we start to struggle with, do we have enough acres? Because we're adding that high nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium source into that operation.
Yeah, that
That's
all
a very
makes.
good point that like lots of there it is common for operations to have like multiple enterprises. So they have
Mhm.
dairy, they have a couple beef, and they have a chicken barn. So like
Yep.
what do you do with all that diversity of both
Yep.
manure and like the concentration? But like one farmer facing all those fronts. Great
Yep.
point.
So then it goes back to planning, testing, and
All those
and
things you
really sitting
said.
down and figuring this whole thing out is, do we have enough acres? Um, and do
Record
we need to
keeping.
find more and record keeping, right? Because at the end of the day is, it's good record keeping and making sure that we can pretty much, we can stay in compliance and protect water quality and do all
Hmm.
those fun, happy things.
So I know that I can send an operator to Dana. I can send an operator to Amy. I can send an operator to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Who else can an operator that has animals on their as part of their profile, who can they reach out to for help if they have questions? MPCA, so Pollution Control Agency. Or is
In
there
Stearns
any?
County, that
Yeah, go
feedlot
ahead.
officer, like environmental
Yep.
services, try and
Okay.
really engage in the community as like really and just engaged and open and like answering questions. Amy, I'm sorry, I think I might have cut you off. I cut somebody off.
No, I was just say the feedlot officers are really good. They're crop advisors.
True.
I know Central Soda Crop Advisors, even like Nutrient Federated Co-op Crop Advisors. A lot of the crop advisors in this area are very educated. I would probably say on nutrient management, manure management. They know enough to be dangerous. So they understand, I'll say that, they understand the concept of nutrient management planning.
And then do you have a favorite, I'm going to say home software or a program or a setup that operators can do it on their own if they're savvy? Or is it usually too much and just have somebody help you? Amy's going to say have somebody else help you.
Have someone else help you because there's not really. Okay, let me say this. MPCA has a new software out through their permitting portal right now. It is, I want to say, in the beta testing phase. It is not as simple as it is going to be. We're working with it. It is a little complex. It is better than the spreadsheet they had, I will say that, but it's not 100%. It's getting there. I will say that Central Soda is creating something because we recognize the lack of software out there and the complexity because we have MPCA, we actually have the old University of Minnesota software that we're using. And then you have the spreadsheets and you have everything else, right? I know Wisconsin has it's Snap Plus. So, but the thing there is they use University Wisconsin recommendations. They don't use Minnesota recommendations.
Right. That's the power of like it's depending on the state. But
right.
I really like what you said about the beta testing. I heard from a couple of farmers that like that their experience is that like building your farm and like setting your boundaries and stuff right now is like the most time intensive part.
Yeah.
And then so just like setting so that initial time sink of making everything right for your farm is what one of the big issues right now. So just context for everyone is just like anything, like setting up your profile is what takes a lot of time. So don't be scared, but and realize that everyone wants them to be more friendly and a little ease of experience.
Yes. And since we're in this large animal feedlot area, anything with MPCA talking about permitting, if regardless if you're going for any type of permit moving forward, there's no more paper submissions, there's no more any of that. You have to use the online portal and you have to use the new manure management planner software. So that was a direction that they gave us from the state. So if I'm working with certain counties or Sherburne County, for example, and Miranda wants to build a building, we have to use the new manure management plan software. We cannot turn in the Excel spreadsheet anymore. So I've been telling people they have to give us a lot of lead time because the planning software is not the friendliest. It works. It's just we need time to work through the software to input stuff.
That makes sense. And anytime you're learning something new, it will get better over time.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And they're coming up with new updates in the fall. As myself and our team are working through it, other people are working through it. We're sending out comments for improvements and things like that. So it will get better over the next year or two. It's a little bit of a beast to work with right now.
Well, and besides technical assistance, there are some financial assistance opportunities that I usually, when I talk to a farmer, if no one knows that you want to do something, no one can help you.
Mm,
Um, so if there is, even in 2 years, if you think you might want to do apply for a new pond or a new building, or you need a new manure spreader, if I don't know about it, I can't help you. And when you're looking at, there are opportunities with NRCS, but you have to be at least a year ahead of time, and there's going to be some other things that you need to put in place. So always contact your local NRCS office and get an EQIP application on file. If you, there's also the Ag BMP program, which is an MDA program that is funneled through Soil and Waters, and we can help with things that are manure related, including manure spreaders. Even if that's something that you need upgraded for your farm, it's just has to be tied to water quality. So there are opportunities out there. If you are a certified Minnesota Ag Water Quality Farm, or if you're seeking that, remember they have those $5,000 grants every year that can be put towards something that you need to do manure related on your farm. So there are good opportunities out there if you want to look at those, and they can potentially help you work with someone like Amy Centrosoda to put together those manure management plans. But again, if we don't know you want to do it, we can't help you. Going back to you can't come in April and want to do something in May. We need a little bit more time than that. And
yeah.
on the NRCS timeline, we need a year. Uh, so always be thinking ahead. But
Well,
any other closing thoughts? Dana, did you want to talk about Dairy Month before we close?
oh, sure. I mean, you can always talk. Well, you can't always. June. June is Dairy Month. So engage your local dairy producer. Go to a dairy event, whether that's through Midwest Dairy, through your local dairy, like County Dairy Association. So Stearns County Dairy, like ADA, American Dairy Association. I know that this year at the Stearns County Fair, we're having a milk run. They have a milk run at the during the state fair. That, well, I mean, there's always ways to engage your dairy producers, and this is just like a call out to like reach out to them, visit a farm, talk to a dairy producer, and like my favorite opening question is like, so what's your favorite cow? And I'm like, oh boy, do they have a favorite cow? Oh, or like, do you like taking care of calves? You either love it or you hate it. So they would love to share. So
Mhm.
June is an excellent month to buy dairy products, to engage your dairy producers and support your dairy producers. So that's my shout out to June is Dairy Month.
Great. Thanks, Dana. And thank you both for your insight today. And like we mentioned, there will be resources where what we talked about, and a lot of things we'll have links there for you. All right. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Dana.
Yep.
Of course.